Okay, sorry, I'd like to ask your permission before I record.
Yeah, no problem.
I was hoping that we wouldn't have any power outage here in Ghana. You know, these days you have a lot of issues with the power. So I was just praying that we wouldn't have that so that we'll be able to have this interview.
Yeah, no, it's just sort of the sort of reality, isn't it? Like we have the similar sort of challenges in Nairobi from time to time, and it's you just make do.
Mm. So, Mr. Andrews, if you can please sit up a bit for me so that we're able to get it well. So first of all, can you briefly tell me a bit about you?
Yeah, with pleasure, Mahmoud. So many thanks for reaching out. My name's Andy Rae. I am an environment and climate change lawyer by background, and I have the privilege to serve as UNEP's head of our International Environmental Law Unit in the Law Division of UNEP. I'm based in Nairobi at our global headquarters. UNEP, as you may know, is the only UN agency that has its global headquarters based on the African continent, something we're very proud of and has very much enriched the work that we do in UNEP.
Okay, so I think I sent you a list of questions that we would like to talk about, few questions. And I would just like to ask, are you able to tell us how many environmental laws we have, do we have so far, and which of them is the most recent one?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of environmental laws around the world. It's really a question of at what level. So, and we can break that up into national laws, into regional laws, and global laws. So obviously in our capacity as a UN agency, we closely track and support and engage with international environmental law, but we also closely track and engage with member states and other actors on national laws. At the international level in the field of environment, it's one of the most prolific areas of international law when it comes to the number of instruments. And there are at least 500 multilateral environmental agreements that range from everything from climate change to pollution to waste to crime. These are instruments that have accelerated in number over the years. In terms of the most recent one, one I would point you to is the Minamata Convention on Mercury. This came into force not so long ago in 2017. It was signed, I believe, in 2013, but it's a convention that is intended to protect people and the environment from harm caused by exposure to mercury. But there's also been other developments in different parts of the world. In Latin America and the Caribbean, they recently signed an agreement on access rights. And there are discussions potentially for other instruments as we speak.
Oh, okay. So this law that you've mentioned, the Mercury one, which has been recently, I mean, is it a proposed one or it has been actually passed?
It has been passed. So it was signed in 2013, so negotiated for some time and then signed by the parties to the convention in 2013. But then it came into force in 2017 after the requisite number of state parties had ratified the convention. So it's in force. It's a law that has a secretariat based in Geneva, one that UNEP closely supports. And now countries are in the process of implementing that convention.
How many countries, please? If you can sit up a bit for me, so that I guess
I can't really sit up, and let me
sorry,
see if I can adjust.
Good.
My...
I think that's good. That's good. Yeah. That's good now. Thank you so much. How many countries?
The convention from memory has at least 130, I think it's 131 parties and 128 signatories. Ghana, country you're calling from, ratified the convention in 2017.
So Ghana is part of this signatories?
Yes, yes.
Wow, thank you. I'm sure you are aware that there's this kind of mining, illegal mining, and other small scale mining in Ghana here. I'm sure you have read or read stories about illegal mining in Ghana, where most of them, almost all of them, use mercury to facilitate the process.
Yes, I mean, mercury is a continuing challenge around the world, and the Minamata Convention on mercury is a very, very important step in supporting countries to address the mercury problem. The convention doesn't put a ban on mercury. That's an important thing to note. Instead, what the convention does is it sets out quite a comprehensive approach to address mercury through the whole life cycle, from its mining to its management as a waste. So it still provides for allowable use and includes provisions on the phase out of mercury and its compounds. So that's the first point I would make. It does seek to control but not ban. So with respect to gold mining and artisanal and small scale gold mining, the convention does set out provisions on how states will take steps to reduce and where feasible eliminate the use of mercury and mercury compounds in those processes. I don't want to sort of speak to any particular member state's position, but I do note that Ghana, where there is artisanal small-scale gold mining, is part of an exciting program called Planet Gold. And this is a program that brings together governments, the private sector, these ASGM communities in different countries, I think it's 9 countries, to try and improve production practices and the work of artisanal and small-scale gold miners. That project is now in its second phase, and it will support countries like Ghana to try and sort of have a transformation towards mercury-free artisanal gold production.
Okay. So how about monitoring these countries that you mentioned? Now these countries have agreed to control the use of mercury in their various countries. How do you monitor them?
So UNEP, we don't monitor them. That's not our mandate. Depending on the convention, there are processes, and including in the Minamata Convention on Mercury, there are processes which set out the requirements on states to report, to submit assessments of the current situation and how they are complying with the requirements of the convention. And I know various countries have submitted their own assessment reports that set out the scale of the issues in their country. But as a UN agency, UNEP, we don't go country by country and look at compliance. That's not our mandate to do that.
But it is important that these countries that have agreed to control the use of mercury, I mean, go by this agreement. So there should be a mechanism where we can be able to know whether they are going by this agreement of controlling the use of mercury. So how, as an agency, how can you be able to measure that, to be able to know that, yes, since after they have agreed to control the use of mercury, this is what we have found out, this is what they are doing, and we are sure that they are going by the agreement?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Mahmood, and it's one of the challenges in international environmental law. How do we make sure that what has been agreed is being implemented? And implementation is, if I could pinpoint the biggest challenge in environmental law, is that. How do we make sure countries are living up to their commitments? And the answer to that very much is determined by the issue. So in the case of the Minamata Convention, it establishes under the convention something called the Implementation and Compliance Committee. This is a body established under the agreement, and it has the objective of promoting implementation. It also reviews compliance with the provisions of the convention. So there is a body under that particular convention that has that responsibility. But there are multiple stakeholders in the enforcement chain, and arguably we all have a role. So not only do states report to their commitments under particular conventions, but on the ground, NGOs have an important role in holding the government to account. The judiciary has an important role in enforcing the laws that are on the books, and then obviously governments themselves invest in the implementation, compliance, and enforcement of the laws and the commitments that they sign up to. It's not easy, and every country, both developed and developing, has a journey with implementation. There are capacity constraints, there are financial constraints, but it's something where we at UNEP are very keen to support countries to increase their implementation.
Thank you very much. But do we have, I mean, in the law that has been passed, are there any sections of the law that prescribe some kind of, for lack of a better word, punishment for countries that are not able to meet the agreement to control the use of mercury in their countries?
Under international environmental law, almost all conventions, treaties do not prescribe punishment per se. We have to remember that these are agreements that are negotiated between and by states, by countries. And it's not common practice for those countries to agree to punitive measures and enforcement provisions like you would find at the national level. In almost all environmental laws at the national level, there are provisions that provide for penalties if they are not being implemented. But when you take it to the international level, it's very rare to find those hard consequence provisions. Instead, what you normally find are processes for dialogue, processes for transparency, where countries have to submit how they are doing, and that information is put to scrutiny by a compliance committee, and people can see what is being put forward. And then the pressure is more soft and not a hard sanction or consequence. And that's just the nature of international law.
But you'd expect them to, I mean, go by the agreement.
Well, that is the expectation when a country signs up to a commitment. The expectation is that they will comply with those commitments, and that is, a principle of international law. Whether that happens is a continuing issue and challenge.
So, do we also have a time period where we would be coming out to see whether countries have actually done something new about this law? For instance, a period where you would want to put together a document to say that, okay, after we passed or implemented this particular law, we've seen that this country has done this, that country has done that. I mean, to be able to paint a picture of what is happening across the world.
Yeah, well, again, it depends very much on the particular issue. So, climate change, as you know, the world agreed the Paris Agreement in 2015, and that agreement sets forth a process whereby countries submit very important reports called their nationally determined contributions. And those are made available to the world, to other countries, but also to their own citizens. And those reports track and report on what they are committing to do over a certain period of time. And so there is an accountability mechanism through that global reporting. And it's the same in the Minamata Convention. There is, as I said, a process for reporting under the convention, and similar obligations exist under other major multilateral environmental agreements. That's at the international level. And then at the national level, you normally see more concrete and detailed requirements where a country will need to report on implementation of a particular law. The level of detail really depends on the jurisdiction. Some countries have very hard obligations on themselves to report on how they are implementing a law. In the European Union, for example, there are very robust review processes to make sure a country is doing what it has committed to do. But then in other states, it's less robust.
All right, so thank you so much. Are we on course to get our environment back to its previous state? Are we on course? Are we doing things right to get a clean environment in the future?
Well, it's a good question because, and I'll sort of refer to the UN Secretary General, who gave a very important report recently on the state of the planet, which you may or may not have seen. But in that address, he said that the planet is broken. He said that humanity is waging a war on nature. And the statistics are alarming. When in UNEP we talk about the triple planetary crisis that we're facing with respect to climate change, pollution, and nature. So in nature, we've lost an unprecedented number of species, around 1 million out of the known 7.8 million species are on the brink of extinction. When it comes to pollution, marine litter is choking our oceans, and we have very significant overfishing challenges. And then in climate change, as you know, as almost every citizen of the world knows, that we are in a perilous state. And emissions are 60 or 62% higher now than what they were when we signed the Convention on Climate Change back in the early 90s. So that's the bad news. The good news, I think, is that there are some positive signs, and that things can be turned around. On climate, countries and businesses are increasingly accelerating their commitments towards a cleaner future. There is the Net Zero Club, where hundreds and hundreds of businesses and many countries now have committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and many have committed to sooner targets. We're also, and this is what I'm particularly excited in as a lawyer, I think we're seeing a rapid shift in citizens understanding their human right to a healthy environment. Over 80% of all countries around the world have the human right to an environment hardwired into their domestic legal system, and citizens are standing up and exercising those rights, particularly youth. Like you're seeing, the likes of Greta Thunberg and movements all around the world are demanding change, and that really is a significant difference to even 5-10 years ago. We're also seeing, I think, a big shift in the private sector away from just CSR, like corporate social responsibility, to what's being termed ESG, environment, social governance, as a new framework and reality on how businesses should act. What is their purpose? Is it to make money, or is it to do good? And that shift has gone just from talking about it to now being demanded by significant stakeholders, not only youth and communities and consumers, but also investors, pension funds, regulators. All of these significant stakeholders are demanding it and requiring it. And so that has shifted things very, very, very quickly. And, the courts are catching up too. Just in climate change, at UNEP, we track the number of climate change cases, and it's gone from 700 or so cases back in 2016 to over 1,500 just in the last 3 years. So that's an exponential tidal wave of climate litigation, and almost every week, if not month, you hear about another court holding a government or now a business to account for their climate change commitments. So positive signs, good news, and the science tells us we do have time to address these crises, but we really need to accelerate action.
Then finally, my final question has to do with, I saw a publication on your website which talks about how new laws could help combat this crisis we are talking about. What are these new laws that could help, combat this, to solve these problems? And are they a committee or something to look at it?
One of the exciting sort of things we're seeing are creative solutions to address the triple planetary crises. And our executive director, Inga Anderson, always says we need to recalibrate our relationship with nature. And the legal community is increasingly identifying possible solutions. One of them is rights of nature. So this is one of the fastest growing areas at the national level and subnational level around the world, where countries are recognizing that nature in and of itself has a legal right to exist and be protected. That's one area. Another area is a very interesting proposal that was released in the last week on proposing a crime of ecocide.
Okay.
And the proposal is to amend something called the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court. It's the instrument that established this court in the Netherlands, in The Hague, to create a fifth international criminal crime that would sit alongside the other major crimes that the ICC currently has jurisdiction for: genocide, crimes against humanity, etc. So that's a a very interesting proposal. It's not law yet. It's just a proposal. It was put together. It's been around for some time as an idea, but it was put together by a panel of 12 very respected international criminal and environmental lawyers have come up with a proposal. It now needs to be formally proposed and considered by countries who are the state parties to the International Criminal Court. But if they do that, then it would be quite a significant step in reforming how we think about even international criminal law. It would be the first time that the court would have jurisdiction over acts against the environment, not just acts against humans.
So when do you expect, do you have a timeline? When do we expect this proposed law or criminal, whatever law to be passed? Do you have any timeline for the process of getting this law into the public domain?
It will really depend on the appetite of states, of countries. Making international laws is not quick. It does take time. There is a formal process, but so it would be impossible to put a timeline on it, other than to say the idea is a compelling one that many NGOs and commentators have welcomed, but really now it's up to countries to take it forward if they want to.
So you are here to speak to countries?
So we, UNEP, are not in the driving seat of this law. This is, as I mentioned, a proposal put together by a panel of private individuals. It was commissioned, the work was commissioned by an NGO called the Stop Ecocide Foundation. And it will really be a case of whether a member state or group of member states that are parties to the International Criminal Court. So this is a body that sits outside of UNEP. It's got no institutional relationship with UNEP in that sense. It sits in the Netherlands, and there are parties to the Rome Statute that established that convention. They need to meet and decide, do they want to take this forward formally.
I'm sure you have the opportunity to look at the law itself, the content, what it contains. How is it going to work? Do we have a stage where somebody who destroys destroy the environment has to be sent to the International Criminal Court? At what stage do we get people there to punish them? Because we also have laws, environmental laws in other countries. So at what stage can we definitely, or can we say that so and so has really committed a crime that we need to send him to the International Criminal Court?
Mama, just 1 second. Stella, I'm just in an interview, okay? Okay, go and tell Mummy. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mama. Stella, I need to take this call. I'll come soon, okay? Apologies, Mahmoud.
No.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I would say to that. It's a really interesting question. Firstly, this particular law, and if and when the International Criminal Court has that power, the jurisdiction to do it. I mean, firstly, that's going to take it some time. As we mentioned, we don't know if it will be taken up. If it does, then there's also a process prescribed by the rules of the International Criminal Court to govern how and when a prosecution can be taken up. And there are some significant challenges. One second. Harry, I'm just on the call. Look me, I'm on the call. Okay, take this and go inside, please. Quick, go inside. There's a process, and it's not easy. You know, the International Criminal Court is in, you know, intergovernmental body. It sits in the Netherlands. It doesn't have unlimited resources. So there are challenges. That's one. But the second point is picking up on what you said, which I think is a very, very important one, that, you know, there are already laws on the books in many, many, many countries that criminalize damage to the environment. And, you know, for immediate action, we shouldn't forget those laws. And, you know, that's where real change can happen the quickest, by citizens standing up for implementation of those laws, by judges applying those laws, cases brought to them, for governments to commit to enforcing the laws and commitments that they have signed up to. That is where change on the ground happens the quickest.
Correct. Your final words?
You know, as I mentioned, it's good news and bad news. The bad news is significant, alarming, but the good news is hopeful. And we do have time to turn this around. And as the Secretary General said, making peace with nature has to be the defining task of the 21st century. It has to be the top priority for countries, for communities, for individuals everywhere. But many, many thanks, Mahmoud. I enjoyed the conversation, and happy to provide any further information you need. How would you take this further? Is this going to be in print, or how would you do it?
It will be published online. Yeah. So I would send the links to you when it is published. Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't be afraid to get in touch if you want to check any facts or anything like that. I'm happy to provide any further information.
Can you say that again, please?
I was going to say, if you want to check any facts or figures or anything mentioned,
yeah. That's the more reason why I was requesting for a number that I can easily get you, probably a WhatsApp number that I can easily get you. When I start to work on the story, I would like to, I mean, at least engage with you to let you know what I am putting out there. That's why I was requesting for your number in the email. I don't know if that would be possible. I can have it now. Then, if you can send it to me on the queue.
Yeah, I've just sent it to you on the chat. Can you see that?
I've seen it. Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, no, of course. Get in touch anytime.
So, thank you. Your message to Ghanaians?
Be hopeful, be excited. You're an amazing country, and really one of the jewels of Africa. So, you know, there's so much in front of you, and it's a privilege to work on the same continent. And I can't wait for the opportunity when COVID restrictions stop to be able to come and visit.
Thank you so much. We would like to meet you one day. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm so grateful. And I'm so happy about this. I think it's been an opportunity for me as a journalist to speak to people like you. Even in Ghana, it's become difficult to speak to authorities. But in fact, when you replied my message, I was so excited. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for your time. And I will keep in touch.
Thanks, Mahmoud. Have a good day.
Same.
Bye.
Bye-bye.